I mean, think about such a tiny portion of the world's population, yet there are those out there to say, you know what? If we just did away with the Jews, we'd solve a lot of the world's problems. They had 180 tanks against 1,400 Syrian tanks. Hey, I want to welcome you today to the Uncensored Pilgrims podcast. I'm Marty McLain, along with
Paul Price,
the irrepressible Paul Price. And we're delighted to have you with us today. Today we're going to talk about the nation of Israel. And the reason why we're going to take time to talk about the nation of Israel is because I just took a trip to the nation of Israel. So it just seems like the thing to do. You know, Israel is all in the news. Israel continues to be in the news.
Will always be in the news.
Israel will always be in the news. And, Jerusalem is ground zero when you talk about the return of Christ, when you talk about end times, prophecy. You know, it's interesting, when I was there, you look at the Mount of Olives, and that's a very significant place in Jerusalem with the return of Christ. And you see all these graves, all these coffins, all these things set up. They said they're all facing their feet to the east, because as the Jews see it, as when the Messiah comes the first time, they're going to come up. But he's already come, right?
Yeah, that grave shattering event already happened.
It has happened.
And by the way, did you see any olives on the Mount of Olives?
I don't know. I saw a lot of graves on the Mount of Olives. I saw a lot of olives. There were a lot of olives over there, a lot of olive trees.
But not on the Mount of Olives.
No, I didn't notice. I should have looked for olives on the Mount of Olives. But
well, that's a missed opportunity.
It is a missed opportunity. It's a fascinating place when you go over to Israel. Now, I went with an organization that is what they would say non-conversionary, non-partisan. It's a evangelical organization that is just for the explicit purpose of saying the United States should have policy that is favorable toward Israel. And that's the sole purpose of the organization that I went with. Me and I think about 25 other pastors, they took us all around the nation of Israel. We were there for 10 days. We went from the time we left the hotel to the time we came back in the evening. I mean, we were constantly going from one place to the next, to the next, to the next. It was not your typical sightseeing adventure. A lot of geopolitical sites we went to. And I want to talk about some of that, but Paul, I want to ask you a question, okay? You got your, I want you to take your tinfoil hat off, and I want you to put your thinking cap on, okay? So the tinfoil hat is off, and the thinking cap is on. Okay, so how many Jews do you think there are in the world today?
Well, so the figure that always comes to mind is everybody remembers that Hitler killed 6 million Jews.
That's right.
And so whenever you think about numbers and Jews, that's like the number that comes into your mind, 6 million Jews.
Always 6 million, yes.
But you know what? I guess I'm going to go with 6 million. Because that's just my best guess. There you go.
Paul, you disappoint me, man.
All right, how many Jews are there in the world today?
15.3 million Jews.
Well, I was only off by, what,
you were close.
7 million?
But wouldn't you think there'd be more than that?
I really don't know.
Okay, you don't know, okay.
I mean, honestly, there's not that many Jews. I mean, even 15 million for a world population is pretty low.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. How many do you think live in Israel?
I mean, of Americans, there's like over 350 or 375 million. I don't know, maybe we're getting closer, up to 400 million by now. I haven't checked in a while, but
yeah, and there are actually
Americans.
There's actually you're talking about our total population, yeah, and of the American population, there's 6 million Jews in America.
There's that number, 6 million.
There you go.
Again.
You're right about that. I should have said how many live in America.
Now, but when you say 15 million, are you talking only about the ones that live in the land of Israel?
No, there are 7 million Jews that live in Israel.
Okay.
7 million. So
when you add 7 and 6, you get 15. So if you're not,
that's some of that new math.
Yeah.
7. Yeah. So you have an
extra
2.
Sorry.
So what happens is that you have
that was the wrong direction. 7 and
2
6
million that
would
are dispersed throughout other countries like
13 million.
Canada, France, England. They're in some of these other nations as well. But
mostly in America, though. The ones that
yes,
the ones that aren't in Israel are mostly
in America. And, you think New York State and places like that, and so you're looking at really a tiny portion of the world's population.
Yeah.
I mean, a tiny, less than 1% of the whole world's population. It's 0.2% of the world's population are Jews.
Wow, 0.2%.
0.2%. So, I mean, think about such a tiny portion of the world's population, yet there are those out there to say, you know what? If we just did away with the Jews, we'd solve a lot of the world's problems.
Well, it is interesting how the Jews somehow seem to wield a level of influence in the world that is far in excess of their numbers.
Yeah, it's almost like there's something with God going on.
Almost like they're God's chosen people, like the Bible says.
Like Genesis 12, maybe?
I mean, I always think of it like from an atheist perspective, like how do they... Isn't it odd, like that what we see in reality... you would think if God did choose a people and did work specifically through that people group, that people group would have perhaps a disproportionate amount of effect on world history and on the world in general than every other people group. And lo and behold, I think that's what we do see with the Jewish people.
I think you're exactly right. The influence that they have. I mean, even when you look at the number of Jewish people who have won Nobel Peace Prizes, and their contribution to the good of the world, it is so disproportionate to their size.
Yeah,
and so you have to. I think if you want to do something interesting, look at all the words that Mark Twain has spoken about the Jewish people.
Okay.
I mean, just kind of amazed. So he talks about how all these other empires, Romans are gone, the Babylonians are gone, the Persians are gone, Greeks are gone. As far as they're but the Jews, they still remain.
Yes.
And they have maintained their integrity. And a group of people to be dispersed for 1900 years from 70 AD to 1948.
Yeah.
Without a nation, yet they maintain their cultural identity, their religious identity, and able to come back and reconstitute themselves as a nation. Paul, that doesn't happen unless something else is involved.
It's miraculous. Yeah.
I mean,
by all accounts. I mean, sure, it has to be miraculous to say that people group that should have been wiped off the face of the earth 1,000 times over is now in possession of their ancient homeland.
Yeah, you think about all that they survived: the Spanish Inquisition, the Russian pogroms. You survived the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And yet then you're able to reconstitute yourself against all odds in the land that you had 1,900 years ago as a nation.
More than that, really.
Yeah.
More than 19, because under the Roman occupation,
Yeah, they were, and then before the Romans, you had the Seleucids, you had the Greeks, you had the Persians, the Babylonians. I mean, it's just such an inviting piece of land. You have that land bridge between Africa, Asia, and Europe. I mean, it's just a very strategic location.
Yeah.
But the Jewish people are incredible. Now, let me just say this: biblically speaking, when they rejected Jesus as the Messiah, I believe, if you look in the book of Romans, they were set aside.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a Jew has to be saved through Jesus to go to heaven.
Yeah.
The Apostle Paul, when he was Saul of Tarsus, he had to receive Christ as Messiah. When Jesus talked to Nicodemus at night, he said, "Verily, verily, I say to thee, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of heaven."
And I think there's some confusion among Christians. I've heard people before who thought that just by virtue of being a Jew, physically, then that you would be saved on that basis.
They made that mistake during the day of Jesus. They said we have Abraham as our father.
Yeah.
And that was a mistake. And so you have to have faith in Jesus. And so I totally agree with that. But if you read prophecy, read Scripture, and take it seriously, you know that Scripture would speak of the Jews being in the land when at the time of Christ, his second return happens.
Yes.
Then times there was going to be a reconstitution of the Jewish people in the land that God had given them. Yeah. And it's amazing now. that just kind of I just kind of want to kind of set the stage with that and tell you some of the stuff that we did. Of course, the Jewish nation, they constituted themselves May 14th, 1948. That was in response to the UN having passed Resolution 181 that called for a two-state solution in Palestine. There'd be an Arab state and the Jewish state, and it would be roughly, somewhat 20-something% Israel, 70-something% Arab as far as the land.
Now, is that what they call the Balfour Declaration?
The Balfour Declaration was in 1917. It was the Foreign Secretary of England, Arthur Balfour. He said basically His Majesty's views would favor the constitution of a Jewish homeland in Palestine, basically.
Okay. So that was on the books all the way back in 1917.
Yeah, and what happened is that when the Ottoman Turks were defeated in World War I, Palestine had been under the Ottoman Turks for centuries, under their control. And so you had the northern part of that area, the Lebanon, that was the French mandate. And then the southern part there, what we know as Palestine, that was the British mandate. And from 1917 to all the way to 1948, it was under the British control.
Yeah.
And, the British had to be careful because they didn't want to enrage the Arabs, and especially when you start talking about letting the Jews have a homeland. And so they eventually turned it over to the United Nations in 1947. And then they came up with a two-state, reinstituted a two-state solution, so to speak. And when Israel, they were getting the short end of the stick, but they're like, we got to have a homeland. We'll take whatever we can. And they did. And the day after they constituted themselves as a nation, all the surrounding Arab nations attacked them.
Yeah.
And against all odds, they won. Israel won. And one thing that was amazing to me when we were over there is when you go to their monuments.
Yeah.
Like for the 67 War, 6-Day War, and then the Yom Kippur War in 73, and the Independence War of 48, the people tell you exactly how many died.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll tell you to the last digit.
Yeah.
I was always, even the tour guide would say, in this battle we lost, and they'd tell you specifically how many people.
Yeah.
And it just stuck with me. They know exactly. I mean, we don't know how many people we lost in the Civil War or in the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
In World War I, World War II. I mean, that's just not something we recall right offhand.
Yeah.
But you can see how precious life
is
to the Jewish people. And there's not that many of them. So anyway, they've been able to maintain their identity. They've been able to defend themselves since 1948. I mean, could you imagine you finally get a nation after 1900 years or whatever, and the next day everybody attacks you?
Well, they were basically placed into a hornet's nest, right? Everybody there didn't want them to be there.
Right, and a lot of them,
they felt like that was their land.
Yeah, and they weren't doing that much with it.
Yeah.
But when you have when the Jews are there and they've come out of these concentration camps, and they've survived the Holocaust, they're going to fight with everything they got.
Yeah.
Plus, I believe they had the hand of God on them because God was going to let them come back into the land. And so they defended themselves, and then you had the 6 Days War of 67, where it was a preemptive attack by the Jews. The surrounding Arab nations, they were going to attack the Jews. Israel knew it, so they preemptively launched their attack, and that's when they gained Jerusalem, they gained the West Bank, they gained the Gaza Strip, they gained the Golan Heights.
So the original formation of Israel from 1948 did not include Jerusalem.
That. And the reason why they call this occupied land now is because they technically viewed Israel as the aggressor because they took the first action.
Yeah.
It was either take the first action or let everybody keep building up their army around you and then wait for them to wipe you out.
Yeah.
So anyway, then Israel went in there. Also, they took the whole Sinai Peninsula.
Yeah.
So the amount of land that increased was dramatic. Okay, so it was a sore spot. And then in 73, you had the Yom Kippur War. Israel's celebrating Yom Kippur. They were totally caught by surprise. They were not ready. They were not expecting an attack. This is how bad it was. From one of the sources I read, in the south of Israel, they had 500 soldiers facing 600,000 men. In
Wow.
the north, they had 180 tanks against 1,400 Syrian tanks. And within 18 days, Israel won, and the Arabs wanted a ceasefire.
That's just miraculous. How do you explain such a miraculous military
It
victory?
would have to be God. I mean, that's the only way you could describe it. So when you see 67 and 73, you see the wars and how Israel came out on top. Matter of fact, if I've read correctly about 73, they were marching on Damascus.
Yeah.
If they had not called a ceasefire, Israel was marching on Damascus.
Yeah.
So, it was to the Arabs' advantage to, okay, we need to quit.
Yeah.
Uncle, whatever, I'm going to tap out or whatever they needed to do. So anyway, that's kind of the situation with Israel. When you hear the occupied territory, that's what they're talking about because they still consider it occupied territory. The Arabs still have this, what they call the right to return. They want to return into Israel itself. And if they brought back all these millions and millions of Arabs, it would no longer be a Jewish state.
Yeah.
And that would be death to the Jews.
Yeah.
And so there's not going to be a right to return. Israel has given back the Sinai Peninsula. They gave it back to Egypt. They're still in possession of the Gaza Strip, although the Gaza Strip, they have these zones, Israel does, areas A, B, and C, and each area is a different way of self-rule, so to speak, for the Arabs. Let's see, and this was done by the Oslo Accords, and so in one area you'll have like let's see, Area A constitutes 18% of the West Bank. The Palestinian Authority controls most of the affairs in this area, including internal security. Now, the Area B comprises about 21% of the West Bank, and the Palestinian Authority controls education, health, and the economy. In both areas, Israeli authorities have full external security controls. This means that the Israeli military retains the right to enter these areas at any time, typically to raid homes or detain individuals under the pretext of security. Now, I'm reading this from an article. All right, so about 2.8 million Palestinians live in crowded areas in areas A and B, whose major Palestinian cities and towns are Hebron, Ramallah, and Bethlehem and Nablus. Now, Area C is the largest section in the West Bank, and it comprises about 60% of the Palestinian Authority, of the Palestinian territory. It has also decided the vast majority of the more than 200 what they call illegal Jewish settlements in the West Bank, where more than 400,000 Jewish people live.
Who calls it illegal? The Jewish government or the Palestinian government?
I think the international community will, because it's still considered disputed territory because Israel was, quote, the aggressor. They took the initial action. But Israel, having been over there, I'll tell you this: Israel's not going to give that.
Right.
They're not. There's a lot that they're not going to give up. And now they have given up. What they've done is they've allowed some autonomy in these areas with the Palestinians. The Palestinians control the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority, but the Gaza Strip on the Mediterranean coast, that is controlled by Hamas. Now, they had elections, and lo and behold, Hamas, the terrorist organization, won.
Yeah.
So, that some people refer to them as a terrorist organization, but it's like I said, the people who live there, everything they have, quote, comes from Hamas.
Right.
And so we went to the Gaza Strip, and they had to build this big, huge wall.
Isn't that kind of like how in Mexico you've got little cities where everything that like the local people have comes from the drug cartels?
And they're the benevolent givers.
Yeah, and isn't it basically, wouldn't it be kind of like compared to that?
Yeah, Hamas is a terrorist organization.
Yeah.
When the Jewish settlements that were in the Gaza Strip, when they had one of these peace agreements, Jewish settlements had to leave. And Hamas came in there and they did away with the greenhouses. They did away with a lot of the infrastructure. They wanted to make life miserable.
Yeah.
Okay. And so Hamas is in control of the Gaza Strip. Now, here's what's so interesting. So they control the security. They control the infrastructure. They control all that. And Hamas will lob rockets into the Jewish communities right on the other side of the border.
Yeah.
And we were in one of those Jewish communities. And matter of fact, when we got off the bus and they were showing us around, they said, "Hey guys, y'all stay real close together." They didn't tell us why. And then we went into a bomb shelter and we had our briefing with this guy that's a former military guy that's a resident there. And he said, when they fire rockets from Hamas, for every 10 kilometers, you have 15 seconds from the time the siren goes off.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the radar detects when the rockets are fired. So from the time that siren goes off, you got 15 seconds per 10 kilometers. But this settlement was right at the edge of Gaza.
Yeah.
So you only had 7 seconds.
Yeah.
So this Jewish community of about 3,000 or 4,000 people, they have bomb shelters like on the corner of the basketball court. Every 30 yards in the neighborhood, each house has a bomb shelter. And when the siren goes off, they have 7 seconds. If your kid's at school, the kid's got 7 seconds to get to that bomb shelter.
Yeah.
That's what that Jewish community lives with.
Yeah.
In that, because the Hamas people are firing rockets. Now, there's a power plant on the Jewish side of the Gaza Strip. It provides all the power for the Gaza Strip. Hamas tries to bomb the power plant that provides the power.
Yeah.
And when we were meeting this guy, one of our guys said, "Why don't you just turn the power off?"
Yeah.
You know, there's 2.53 million people in the Gaza Strip. Turn the power off.
Yeah.
He said, "Why would I do that? I want to give those people hope.
Yeah.
I want them to have hope. If they have hope, they have something to build on. They have something to live for."
Yeah.
But see, Hamas doesn't want them to have that hope because they want to keep people stirred up.
Yeah.
And the people in these places like the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, these Palestinian areas, they're still, some of these places are still considered refugees. And they still have refugee status after decades.
Yeah.
And nobody in the world has this type of setup other than the Palestinians in and around Israel.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, what happens is that Israel is now looked at as like the apartheid oppressors.
Yeah.
And you got to remember there's only 7 million Jews in Israel. There's only 15 million Jews in the world. They are surrounded by millions and millions and millions, tens of millions of Arabs. But yet Israel, the Jews are looked at as the oppressor.
Yeah.
Because, quote, the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the Golan Heights are still considered disputed territory.
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult living in some of these areas because you never know when somebody's going to shoot a rocket.
Yeah.
Now,
without that quote unquote oppression, as you mentioned, then the nation of Israel would cease to exist.
Yeah.
And so the international community doesn't really want to protect the right of the Israeli people to their own homeland.
Right.
They would rather have just let the Arabs overrun it in essence.
It's sad. And you have some of these pious, sanctimonious people engaging in this boycott, divest, and sanction, BDS is what they call it. Even I think maybe the Presbyterian USA and United Methodist Church have also engaged in it, where they're going to boycott, divest, and sanction against Israel.
That sounds about right for those denominations that you mentioned.
And so what they take the side of the Palestinians. Now, here's what I saw. I did not pick up a lot of animosity with most of the Jewish people that we dealt with toward the Arabs.
Uh-huh.
They want them to have hope. As a matter of fact, they actually did a survey. And, I think there's like 2 million, maybe over 2 million Arabs that live in Israel. Okay? They've got a pretty substantial Arab population, 20-something percent. 21% of the population in Israel are Arabs. They've done surveys where they ask, would you rather live under the authority of the Israeli government or the Palestinian Authority?
Yeah.
And overwhelmingly, now they have to do this, you can't say this publicly, but when they're given the anonymity, overwhelmingly they said we want to stay under the authority of the Israelis.
Yeah.
Because they have rights, they have a future, they have hope, they have an economy, they have things that function.
Yeah.
But they don't have that when you have. It's not that the Arabs are bad, it's just the people who rule over them are not good.
Yeah.
And you don't have a functioning society.
Yeah.
But when you're in Israel, you see how the Jews and the Arabs, they're all in there together.
Yeah.
And of course they have checkpoints. The guy that actually built all the fences for the Gaza Strip and for the certain places with Bethlehem and in certain places, I think in Jerusalem and the West Bank, the checkpoints, he was like, man, they did everything they could. But when they had the Intifada, which means the shaking off. It's when there was the uprising of the Palestinians against the Israelis.
Yeah.
And people were being blown up at restaurants, cafes, bus stops. Finally, what took the cake is I think they had one guy that was actually in a bus full of kids and person blew themselves up. And so they're like, we can't do this anymore. And so what they did is they started having checkpoints for the Arabs that would come into Israel that lived in these occupied areas, so that they would not bring in bombs and explosives and blow people up.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the nation of Israel, they are in a life or death situation on a continual basis. I tell you one things we did, Paul. We went to this one center called the Alma Center, and it deals with the northern defense of Israel's borders. Alma, yeah.
Which is the Hebrew word for young woman / virgin.
Really? Okay. Well,
you remember that Alma, like a virgin will conceive. It's the prophetic word about the virgin will conceive.
Well, maybe isn't that something? It's a woman that runs it.
But it's
she's a former defense intelligence officer.
That's the word that all the skeptics like to nitpick about, because they like to say, oh, it doesn't really mean virgin, it means young woman.
Yeah.
Which isn't the case. In fact,
I agree.
It is. And the Greek word that's translated in the Septuagint for that is parthenos, which is virgin. So there's no question that it's supposed to indicate virgin. But of course, when skeptics get involved, every last thing has to be proved, and everything is always guilty until proven innocent with them.
Yeah,
so.
You are guilty until you're right.
In any case, I'll let you continue. I was just going to mention about what Alma means.
Well, this Alma Center is an educational research center. It's dedicated to research into security challenges of Israel's northern borders, and they want to educate opinion makers from research centers, like academia, and others on the multidimensional complexities in the Middle East. So we went there. There's about 25 of us. They put us in groups of about 5, and they said, okay, like the group I was with, we were the Defense Department, so to speak, Secretary of Defense, and somebody was, the Prime Minister, and anyway, we had 5 divisions there. They said, we're going to give you a situation, and you've got to have an answer for us in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So situation-wise, there's this complicated missile system coming in from Iran. Hezbollah was bringing it into the north, and they're bringing it in through Syria, and they were going to take it into Lebanon. And it was going to have it's an accurate missile system with the range to hit Tel Aviv.
Okay.
So, and they said, as long as we know where it's at a warehouse right now in Syria, but once it gets into Lebanon, we'll lose it.
Yeah.
So we just had a few hours, within a few hours, they had to make a decision. So we need to know. We had 15 minutes to make the decision. So we had to take all this stuff into consideration, went through the process of everything, and we said, you've got to bomb it in Syria.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that they stressed at Alma Center was basically Israel has to make choices where there's not a good choice. You have to take the lesser of bad choices.
Yeah.
So if you bomb where it's at in Syria, then that's going to stir the Syrians up. And Hezbollah will probably counter with a lot of rocket strikes into Israel.
Yeah.
But if you let it go, then you don't know where that's at, and that's a missile system that can hit Tel Aviv and do pretty pinpointed damage.
Yeah.
It's kind of a guided missile system. So we said that, and so they showed us the consequences and everything. And lo and behold, just a few days later, Israel blew up a missile system in Syria.
Okay, so they agreed with your decision.
Yeah, we were like, okay, I reckon we made the right decision, which I thought that was very interesting. Now, I will tell you this. A lot of things changed, I think, with the Oslo Accords when they try to have peace between the Jews and the Palestinians and everything. And Bethlehem used to be a Christian town up till, just a few years ago. Now there's like maybe 16% Christian, and the rest are Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go into Bethlehem, this is what the sign reads. Now we had our tour guide was Jewish, and here's what the sign reads on the road as you're going into Bethlehem. quote, "This road leads to Area A under the Palestinian Authority. The entrance for Israeli citizens is forbidden, dangerous to your lives, and is against the Israeli law." So a Jew, by law, is not to enter into Bethlehem.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
But Christians, are they allowed in?
Oh, yeah, Christians can come in. See, they have to have the tourism money.
Yeah.
They need the tourism money. It's kind of interesting. And our Jewish guide went in, and we went to this restaurant, and they fed them, and, because he's bringing them money.
So he's allowed in. The guide is allowed in, even though he's Jewish.
Yeah, but things could turn on him pretty quickly.
But this is under Israeli administration, correct?
No, it's in an area that's under the Palestinian Authority, but yet it's still part of Israel.
It's part of Israel.
But it's disputed territory, but Israel could come in and...
The Israeli military can go in there
They
anytime.
can go in there, yes.
Yeah.
But Israeli citizens are told you don't need to go in there.
Yeah.
You could die. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. One of the things also that we did, we went up to the Golan Heights, which is the disputed area up there on the Syrian border, and that was just fascinating. And just seeing the actual anti-tank ditches.
Yeah.
And driving through that minefield, the second largest minefield in the world next to the DMZ and between North and South Korea. We also went to a tank museum and also saw one of these tanks in the Golan Heights. I think they call it Mach 4 or something. It's a massive Israeli tank. Did you know that they have the Iron Dome on their tanks? The anti-missile system on their tanks?
It's actually on the tank.
It's on the tank. So if they're shooting an anti-tank missile at the tank shoots missiles at the missile and knocks the missile out of the air.
That's amazing.
They said that tank that they showed us, at 45 miles per hour, it can hit a Coke can at 2 miles.
Wow. While
it's going that fast.
Yeah.
Hit a Coke can 2 miles away. It was amazing. We also... we went to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Which we went to the Western Wall on Sabbath, and that was the sights and the sounds of the Jewish community at the Western Wall on Sabbath at sundown. Unbelievable. I mean, it's one of those surreal moments. Thousands of people there. You got the section where the men go and the section where the women go. You can't go intermingle. Mm-hmm. They call them the Black Hatters, the Hasidic Jews with the black hats.
I've seen those. Yeah,
the black, I think they're mostly
the stereotypical ones that you always hear about in New York.
Right.
Yep.
They're there, and even the guy has a thing on his head, the phylactery or whatever, and they rock, and they read, and they recite, and they pray, and they're at the Western Wall because this is close. I think if I understood correctly, because it's right there up against the Holy of Holies. Up against the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
It's as close as they can get to the Holy of Holies, where it used to be. And a lot of them feel like they need to go there to pray.
Now, do they think that they're earning salvation for themselves by doing what they're doing up there? Or what do they think, in their minds, what are they accomplishing with the going there and wailing and crying and everything that they do?
I think they're longing for the Messiah, man.
Yeah.
I do. And they obviously they missed it.
Yeah,
I mean they did, but they long for the Messiah.
Yeah,
and when you go there and you actually, it is a surreal experience when you see the Jewish community in Jerusalem at sundown on the Sabbath.
It's Friday night.
Yes. It began at 6:15 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
The rabbis, I think, declare exactly what time it begins. And what's interesting is we were going there, and it was getting closer to the Sabbath, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes before, you see people running, trying to get to where they're supposed to be before the Sabbath starts.
Because once the Sabbath starts, you can't move beyond a certain amount of paces, right?
Depends on what the rabbi says, I think.
Yeah.
They have a lot of...
They're still under that extreme heavy legalism.
Some of them, those are observant Jews. Now, there's some that are secular. You go to Tel Aviv or Joppa.
Yeah.
That's a very secular field there.
It's an atheistic, liberal kind of field, right?
Yes. Yes. And because when we were in Joppa's like
Lots of like
next to Silicon Valley, it's the number one startup place for businesses in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy high tech. Matter of fact, we went to the Shimon Peres Center for Peace, and we put on these virtual reality goggles, and they were showing us their inventions that they've got over there now, where they can 4D print human body parts.
Now, I've heard of 3D printing. I've certainly never heard of a 4D printing.
Did I say 4D?
I thought you did.
I think I did. Well, they print them out.
Anyway,
They
yeah.
print
3D
the things
print.
out. 3D print them. I don't know why I said 4D. 3D print, and they also do steak, but it's plant-based, so it's not steak.
The impossible, what do they call it? Impossible burger?
Yeah, Impossible burger. But the amount of, and then they talked about the stuff that they can, the nano robots they can put in you that can, get rid of certain things in your body.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want none of that. I think we see some stuff going on with some of that stuff, and I don't want none of that.
Yeah.
So that was not really inspiring. But you have that secular aspect with Tel Aviv and Joppa and places like that. But then you have these observant Jews.
Yeah.
And you see them there at the Western Wall on Sabbath, and it was, I mean, it was phenomenal to see that. But and all I could think, all you can think is like, man, the Messiah has come, Jesus has come.
Yeah.
He's already come. But then when you see that and you see them longing for a Messiah, I mean, there's intense yearning there, man.
Yeah.
I mean, intense yearning.
What percentage of the people, the Jews in Israel, would you say are actually observant?
At least a quarter,
Uh-huh.
I would think. I know this. The Hasidic Jews, when they first, Ben Gurion, David Ben Gurion, the first president, prime minister, whatever, when they first constituted themselves as a nation, the highly observant Jews did not want to be part of the military, and they were such a small percentage of the population, like the highly observant ones. They said, well, they can be exempt.
From military service.
Military service.
Now that surprises me. You would think they would be the first ones to want to sign up.
But one of the deals that's happening now is that the percentage of population that are observant like that has grown so much so that they're like, man, if they keep getting an exemption, this higher and higher percentage getting exemption from the military, there's going to be some issues there.
Yeah.
But here's every young man and young woman has to serve 2 years.
Yeah.
And you see them all like at the Western Wall on Sabbath. You'd see these like young 18, 20-year-old Jewish guys, because it's guys that are separated from girls at the Western Wall. About 40 of them in a big circle going around. They have their sidearm. They're like little Uzi looking guns on their side, and they're in a circle dancing.
Yeah.
With these sidearms, man. I mean, it's but we asked one of the military guys, because we got briefed by, a colonel and maybe a couple of majors. And they said that, no, the 18 to 20-year-olds, they don't fight the battles.
Yeah.
They're not the ones. What happens is that every person that has served in the military, you're on reserve status for a lot of the positions till you're 40 and some till you're 45.
Uh-huh.
And what happens is that if there's ever an outbreak of hostility, you get like a text or you get contact, and you got 5 hours to be with your unit and fighting.
Yeah.
So everybody, something happens, everybody within 5 hours they're at their post fighting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing the way they do that. But one of the things that the guy told us in the Golan Heights, he started talking about Iran. And how Iran's such a difficult situation because, they're ruled by a cleric. They're not your typical nation state. And so with a lot of countries, you can deal rationally with them. But because they're ruled by that cleric says from the Quran that Allah is telling him to bomb Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
They're going to bomb Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
They're not going to question them. They're at the getting higher and higher percentage of the enrichment of the uranium. I don't know if it has to be 90% or whatever it has to be in order to make the bomb.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting close. And, the guy's saying, we hope the international community does something.
Yeah.
But if they don't,
then they will.
They will.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of this major guy was talking to us, and he basically told us, look, we don't need anybody to fight our battles.
Yeah.
We'll fight our own battles. But now, people can do something to avert a problem.
Yeah.
We want them to avert a problem. But, of course, we went over there, and it was Purim when we were over there. I didn't realize it was going to be Purim when we were over there.
Yeah.
That's like the Jewish Halloween. All the kids dress up in Halloween costumes.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting over there. But at least two of the guys over there, our tour guide and another guy, told us this is the way that they approach their feast. Okay, like Purim.
Mm-hmm.
This is how they summarize it. This is how they succinctly put it. They tried to kill us. We won. Now what do we eat?
Okay.
So somebody's always trying to kill them, but they win.
Yeah.
Now we're going to eat something. What are we going to eat?
Yes.
That's kind of, every feast is the prerequisite to the big feast is that somebody's tried to kill us.
Yeah.
And because, be it Pharaoh, be it Haman, whoever it may be, and all of a sudden, we won. Now what are we going to eat?
Yeah.
Which I thought that was a pretty interesting take on it all.
Now, do you know if the prime minister, is he observant or non-observant?
Netanyahu?
Yeah.
I can't see him as a highly religious, observant Jew. Now they all have a certain level of being observant,
mm-hmm.
but some are really, really strict.
Yeah.
They dress the part.
Yeah.
So to speak. I've always liked Netanyahu. Now, Netanyahu, if you've been keeping up with Israel in the news, there were some ultra-Orthodox in the Knesset that were trying to pass a bill that said you could not convert anyone from one religion to another.
Right.
But Netanyahu has come out and said, no, we're not going to pass anything like that.
Yeah.
He was reassuring the Christian community, we're not passing a bill like that.
Yeah.
So if you've heard that in the news lately, the latest I've seen from Netanyahu is that no, that's not going to happen. But fascinating trip. Went to the Jordan River. Some of the guys wanted to get baptized in the Jordan. I thought, hey, I took a pass, but I did float in the Dead Sea.
Now, these guys that wanted to get baptized in the Jordan,
Yeah.
had they already been baptized?
Yes, they had.
Okay. So they're Anabaptists then.
They
Anabaptists believe, that goes back to like the olden days of, they were saying, oh, well, if you got baptized under sprinkling or whatever, then that doesn't count and you need to be baptized again.
Yeah.
But no, to me, okay, it doesn't count anymore.
Yeah.
First of all, baptism doesn't save you in the first place.
Right.
But even if it did save you, it wouldn't save you anymore just because you were in the Jordan River.
The Jordan. Yeah. What's so crazy too is while they were being baptized, there was a dove there.
Oh wow.
You're like, am I seeing this right?
Yeah.
There was a dove there flying around. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
I think that's happened. Happened before.
Yeah. Well, that was a little bit of a different dove.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a little bit more to that one, wasn't there?
Yeah.
But we also saw, during the British
there was no voice coming from heaven.
No, I didn't hear one.
Yeah.
There's also, during the British Mandate between 1917 and 48, the Jews that were there in Palestine, they were wanting their independence. And there was some underground guerrilla activity. They were having to fight battles even prior to that. And they had to have bullets. They'd always run out of bullets. So they had to have a place to make more bullets.
Mm-hmm.
And so years earlier, this guy, I think it's a Polish guy, bought some bullet manufacturing machines from somewhere. Eventually, they had them smuggled into the country. They built this pit on one of the kibbutz. I forget where it was, somewhere in central Israel and central Palestine at the time. And they dug this really deep hole, and they reinforced it with concrete, made an underground room in it, covered up the top of it, planted stuff on top of it. On one end of it, they had the laundromat, and on the other end of it, they had a bakery. And underneath, underground, they had a munitions factory where they made bullets. They wound up making 2.5 million bullets underneath there.
Wow.
And there's like 70 people in the kibbutz, and like 30-something or 40 were involved in the munitions. The others weren't.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know who they could trust. And if the British found out about it, they could be put to death. And so what happened is that the laundry room hid the noise of the manufacturing of the bullets going on underneath underground.
Yeah.
And the bakery on the other end would hide the smell of the munitions factory. I mean, the way they thought these things out is amazing.
That's pretty amazing.
And when you go over there and you see how they have done their agriculture, I mean, they make the most out of what they've got, man. It is phenomenal what the Jewish people have done with that land.
Yeah.
I mean, it's phenomenal. And to think that there are people, I mean, there's like 7 million Jews over there. Just 7. I mean, there's how many people live in the state of Georgia now?
That's a good question.
It's over 10 million, isn't it?
It's a good question. I don't remember.
Yeah. So, I mean, you think just 7 million Jews over there, and they're able to hold off the aggression of tens of millions of people who are their neighbors, who actually want to kill them. I mean, we'd be riding down the road, and he said, "Okay, guys, right over there, that's Jordan." You're like, "Oh my goodness." Okay, there's Lebanon, there's Syria, and you're like, "This is really a very tiny country." As a matter of fact, what state in the United States does it most resemble in size? If you had to guess,
I'd probably guess Rhode Island or Delaware.
Close, New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yeah.
All right.
It's about the size of New Jersey.
Okay.
Which is, I mean, tiny. So,
But in Israel, you can pump your own gas, right?
Yeah.
All right. So it doesn't have that in common with New Jersey.
You can't pump your own gas in New Jersey.
No.
Why?
It's illegal.
Why?
Goes back to some kind of corrupt bureaucrat deal. But basically,
Gas Pumpers Association?
yeah, there's people that have to get paid to pump gas. You're not allowed to pump your own gas.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, I have to remember that. Next time, whenever I'm in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Which I don't think I will be. I don't want to be. But anyway, if you've never been to Israel, I want to encourage you. And also, I think we need to always encourage our elected officials to be supporters of Israel. I believe that God's got them in the land, and I believe that, like a lot of folks, believe that the United States was raised up as a protectorate of Israel in some ways. But one of the things that, and this was so crazy, when I was praying about whether or not to go on the trip, I was actually reading through the book of Esther. It was weird. It was unreal. And then when I went over there, it was actually Purim.
Yeah.
And the connectedness, I was like, wow, man, that's kind of a little bit odd. But, in the book of Esther, when Mordecai tells Esther, hey, deliverance is going to rise for the Jews for somewhere. If it doesn't come from you, it's going to come from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And, God's going to take care of that nation.
It's such an interesting paradoxical relationship that Christians have with Jews, because on the one hand, the Bible does clearly teach that God has special promises for the people of Israel, for that land. Right. And those promises can't be broken.
Right.
And yet at the same time, the Jews rejected their Messiah.
They did.
Most of them are either atheists who don't believe in any God at all.
Right.
Or if they are observant, then they hate Christians with all their might. And, you go over there and start preaching Christ in that area, there's a good chance you're going to get beaten up or anything. Like, I've heard stories about how it can be dangerous over there for Christians to who aren't just tourists, but who are actually trying to preach the gospel.
Right.
And so it's a paradox, because I agree that we do need to support the nation of Israel, support their right to exist.
Right.
Because that is God's will. It is their country that God gave to them.
Right.
So I support their right to exist. Doesn't mean we always have to agree politically with every statement that's ever made by the Jewish government, or everything they ever do. Doesn't necessarily make it right. But I do believe that it would be unbiblical to deny the Jews the right to exist in their homeland.
Right.
So
right.
and
that's the organization I went with. That's their main thrust, is saying,
Yeah.
God's, said this in His Word. The Jews are over there, and we need, as a nation, we need to make sure that we are supporters.
and more importantly, God's
their right to exist.
Yeah, but more importantly, as you said, if it doesn't come from us, it'll come from somebody else, because God's word can't be broken.
Right.
They will not be
Right.
cast out of their land, because we know now it'll just be a remnant, of course.
Right.
And we don't know how bad things are going to get. If you read Revelation, sounds like it's going to get pretty bad at some point.
And also you read the Jewish relationship to the Antichrist.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
When you read that, when you read what's coming up, you read about Jerusalem's role.
Yeah.
Aren't
they essentially going to place themselves under the rule of the Antichrist in effect?
They will be, if I understand correctly, from what some people interpret, that they will be duped for a little bit.
They may even interpret this Antichrist as their Messiah, as the fulfillment of their prophecy for Messiah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, there's going to be a duping.
Yeah.
But then there's going to be a reckoning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
they
interesting.
will look on him whom they pierced.
Him whom they pierced.
Yeah.
That's right. So, Israel just being in the land is fulfillment of prophecy.
Yeah.
And the prophecy that's yet to be fulfilled with Israel being in the land is kind of a little bit scary, so to speak. I mean, it's almost like I reckon if you have a horror film with Antichrist in it, wouldn't it be kind of an intense horror film?
I think it would.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on the Temple Mount question?
Whew.
Do you think that the Muslim structure that exists on the Temple Mount right now, do you think that is the end times temple that is a blasphemy? As I've heard some Christians place that as, they say, well, that end times blasphemous temple is standing today, and it's called the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Right. It's
so
not
that's
the Dome of the Rock. That's next to it. You're right.
Yeah. So that's one interpretation, and then the other interpretation is that what's on the Temple Mount now will be torn down, and then a Jewish temple will be constructed, and that will be a blasphemous temple where the Antichrist will stand.
And some people think that it's in a different location.
Is that right?
I've heard
Not
that
on the
before.
Temple Mount.
Well, kind of a little bit off. So,
interesting.
I don't know how that's going to work out.
Yeah. We'll wait and see, huh?
Well, if we're around, we'll wait and see.
Well, we'll be around one way or another. I don't know.
One of the guys I was with was told that they have all the implements ready. They could reinstate temple worship within 24 hours.
Yeah.
That's what I was told. Now that's the word on the street. Whether or not the street
makes
is
you
right.
wonder what's stopping them.
I don't know.
What are they waiting for?
I will tell you, it was interesting. As I kind of got away from the group, went walking around myself, and there was this billboard, and you put flyers on a billboard.
Mm-hmm.
There was a red heifer.
Uh-huh.
And I couldn't read the Hebrew. I mean, I've had a year of Hebrew, but I know nothing about it anymore. That's a long time ago. And so I asked this lady, I said, "What does this say?" And she said, "Oh, it's a writing contest about the red heifer."
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
the red heifer has special significance with the temple, with the if I understand correctly, with the reinstating of the temple worship.
Yeah.
And so, just seeing the picture of the red heifer on a billboard in Jerusalem, it was like, okay, well, all right.
I just wonder what state of affairs they're waiting on. Like, if they're making plans to reinstitute the sacrifices, what are they expecting to happen that's going to enable them to do that?
I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, yeah, that's what I don't understand.
The disappearance of hundreds of millions of people.
So you're taking a pre-trib. Pre-trib.
I sure hope it's pre-trib, man.
Oh man.
I sure hope it's pre-trib.
That's a whole other can of worms, right there.
Yeah, we won't open that can right now. We will have to before long. But it was a great trip over there. When you see Jerusalem for the first time, it is so it's such a special moment.
Yeah.
First time you physically lay your eyes on Jerusalem. And what made this trip so special is that it was geopolitical as well as spiritual.
That's interesting.
So we combined, talk to the majors, talk to the colonels. The colonel guy saw all the hot points. Had an Arab guy from the Jerusalem Post talk to us one night off the record, and it was very good, very enlightening, coming from an Arab.
Is there anything that's coming up that you learned about while you were there that maybe people over here aren't aware of, like news that's kind of breaking or that type of thing?
Iran, there was a village at Golan Heights on the Syrian side, had 25,000 residents, but because of all the turmoil and civil war in Syria, they evacuated the whole town of 25,000. Now there's only like 6 families there, but Iran is starting to move in Hezbollah into that town on the other side of the Golan Heights, and the Shias. Iran is Shia.
Yeah.
They're not Sunnis. The vast majority of the Muslim world, they're Sunnis.
Yeah.
But Iran, they're Shias.
Mm-hmm.
And so Hezbollah, they're Shiites, and Hamas, I think, are Sunnis.
Okay.
So there's a big difference there. But you're going to have a lot more agitation probably on the northern border, I would think.
Yeah.
And also with the enrichment of the uranium with the Iranians.
Yeah.
It's getting to a point of no return.
Yeah.
Unless somebody does something.
Yeah.
And Israel with the Mossad and all their connections that they have everywhere. I mean, I think there's a lot of things they can do if they want to. And Israel has a handful of nuclear weapons themselves. They're not. It's never. I don't think it's ever been publicly stated. I think one of our ex-presidents may have said something about one time when he wasn't supposed to. But they do have nuclear warheads.
Yeah, well, you're publicly stating it right now. So
yeah,
you just
so
let
I
the cat out of the
bag. Sorry. Yeah, but that's my understanding.
Now, I wanted to ask you this, too, because during the pandemic, it was on the news and it was well known that Israel was probably one of the most pandemic lockdown, heavy-handed places in the whole world. They
learned their lesson. They won't do. I don't think they'll do that again.
So
they depend too much on tourism.
So you're saying that's not like that.
There was no testing. There was nothing about COVID anywhere.
Oh my goodness!
I don't even know if I hardly saw a mask over there.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy how the world went nuts.
Nuts.
And then all of a sudden now, just a short time later, now it's like nothing ever happened.
Yeah. They got rid of their COVID stuff. When you go to the airport, there's nothing.
That's insane to me.
Nothing. You just do your own business.
That was a surreal time, and I have a feeling it's not going to be the last time.
Yeah, I think they're wanting to cook something else up if they can. It's all for control, man.
Yep.
All for control. But, hey, keep your eyes on Israel. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. One of the things they say, you ever watch Fiddler on the Roof?
I haven't seen it.
Next year in Jerusalem.
Oh, is that it?
That's what he used to
say.
Next year.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Tavia, Topol, the guy that played him, he just died recently.
Okay.
Next year in Jerusalem. That's how I used to say it. If I were a rich man.
Now, is Israel still accepting more Jews back into the homeland to this day?
Yes. My understanding is yes. Yes. They come from everywhere. It's interesting, there's even the Ethiopian Jews. They got airlifted.
Yeah.
Like 20 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
I forget how many thousands of them got airlifted, emergency airlifted into Israel.
Interesting.
But so many of them come from the Ukraine. Our tour guide, Peter, was a Soviet Jew from the Ukraine.
Interesting.
And he was a chess champion, too, I think.
I wonder if the war in Ukraine is driving some of them back to Israel now or not.
I would imagine. Anyway, but they had the kibbutzes.
I know there were Jews.
Which is communal living.
There were Jews involved in the Soviet Revolution. Yeah. That is true. A lot of people don't realize that. But.
And so when they started Israel, there was they had the kibbutz, the communal type thing, but then they got away from that, thankfully, because they didn't want anything to do with the Soviet Union.
Okay.
They allied themselves with the United States.
Because that would put them against the United States, which is their benefactor.
So
that
that's
wouldn't
kind
make
of
sense.
an interesting, weave in there with with a little bit of the communism, but they didn't go in that direction, which was good. But they'd still have the kibbutzes. And anyway, so a great trip. Paul, you need to get over there.
It'd be fun to visit sometime.
I think you might could pass if you put on a black hat and a black trench coat.
All right.
I think you might could. You got the beard? everything.
I don't have the hat, but I can.
You can manage.
I can
you
manage.
Get it. So. All right. Well, that's all we got today. Thank you for being with us. Hope you learned a little bit about Israel. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Keep your eyes on the Israeli-Iran angle that's going on. And we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time on the Uncensored Pilgrims. And we need to let you know that the views that we express on this podcast belong to Marty McLain and Paul Price. They are our views. They do not reflect the views of anyone else. And with that said, we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time on the podcast.